The film begins with a young woman named Frida, who dreams of becoming a nail artist with an animal theme, but currently works as a waitress. She shares photos of her nail art on social media. She comes across an interview with a man named Slater King, a billionaire tech mogul. Slater publicly apologizes for unspecified, inappropriate behavior and announces his resignation as CEO. He also discloses that he has purchased an island where he grows food and raises chickens. It turns out that Frida has a crush on him and starts researching more about him online. Additionally, Frida feels frustrated with her monotonous life and expresses her need for a vacation. A few days later, she and her roommate Jess attend Slater's annual gala to work as waitresses. When she tries to talk to Slater, her boss confronts Frida about her behavior at last year's event. She apologizes, explaining how he approached her and complimented her nails. However, her boss advises her to remain inconspicuous this time. The two girls observe the extravagant event, with wealthy guests dressed in their best attire. While working, Frida occasionally glances at Slater. Later, Jess takes her to the locker room, where they change into two party dresses to blend in with the VIPs. Subsequently, they start exploring the party and notice Slater in the distance. Frida begins walking toward him, but accidentally bumps into a server and falls to the ground. At this embarrassing moment, a hand reaches out to help her, which turns out to be Slater's. After introducing themselves, Slater decides to introduce her to his social circle, starting with his therapist, Dr. Rich. Frida jokes that he should blink twice if she's in danger, which Dr. Rich does, and they laugh. Slater then introduces her to his childhood friend Cody, his security, Stan, his right-hand man Vic, and his female friends, Heather and Camilla. Also present are a college graduate named Lucas, a DJ called Tom, and a reality TV star named Sarah. Following this, Frida's night turns into a whirlwind of laughter and alcohol, and she is thrilled to spend time with her crush. However, his assistant, Stacy, arrives and informs them they must leave for the island. The two sadly bid farewell, and Slater leaves. However, as Frida converses with Jess about her experience, he unexpectedly returns and invites them to join him on the island, which they agree to. In the subsequent scene, Slater's entire group, except Dr. Rich, boards a private jet and flies to their destination. Upon arrival, Frida is completely surprised by the generosity of the place. Stacy then appears to collect everyone's phones to ensure their vacation is not disrupted by work issues. They all agree without hesitation, but Jess is doubtful and hands it over. Later, Slater escorts Frida to her room, stocked with clothes to change into. After he departs, she takes a shower and applies an exquisite perfume she finds in the room. While she's about to change, an elderly maid suddenly arrives and looks at her, as if she knows her, calling her Red Rabbit. Frida is bewildered and asks what it means, but the woman leaves the room without responding. Later, Frida goes outside and meets Jess, who is surprised that there are clothes for them, given that they were invited at the last minute, but Frida dismisses it as a perk of being wealthy. The two then meet the rest of the girls, all dressed similarly. None of them find it strange, and they join the men at the pool. While there, Frida continues to exchange looks with Slater, but he's soon approached by Sarah. She tries to flirt with him, but he doesn't seem interested in her, and keeps his focus on Frida. Following this, Slater gives Frida a tour of the place and shows her a rare flower named Desideria, from which their perfume is made. He also reveals that the island is infested with lash vipers, which the workers attempt to eradicate. He then opens up, admitting that he remembers almost nothing about his life before age 10. This is why he visits Dr. Rich, who specializes in repressed memories. Frida finds it strange, but Slater explains that forgetting can be a gift sometimes. As they continue their tour, they come across the assistant, Stacy, carrying several red gift bags. Later that night, everyone gathers in the dining room where candles are lit because the generator isn't working. While eating, Frida accidentally stains her dress. The right-hand man, Vic, then asks her what she does for a living, to which she responds that she's just trying to figure it out. It turns out that Vic is missing a pinky finger, so Slater jokes by asking how he lost it, but Vic doesn't respond. He instead takes out a small bottle of MDMA drugs. After consuming them, the group experiences euphoria, laughs, and has fun. Everything appears to be going well, but when Frida goes to bed, she notices that the stain on her dress has disappeared. She finds it strange, but doesn't think much about it. Over the next few days, they drink bottomless champagne and swim in the pool during the day, followed by gourmet dinners and drugs at night. One evening, Slater notices the scar next to Frida's eye and asks what happened, but she claims to have no idea. She then inquires about her nails. Frida responds by explaining that her small business, Enamels, is a fusion of animals and nails. The answer appears to satisfy him, but he suddenly excuses himself and departs. He leaves in such a rush that he forgets his vaporizer. Later, Frida inspects the vaporizer and notices dirt under her fingernails, which surprises her. The following day, when Frida goes to return the vaporizer, she sees Slater leaving his therapy session with Dr. Rich. Frida greets the doctor. She reminded him of when Slater introduced them at the gala, and the joke about blinking twice. But the doctor nervously agrees with her, before quickly leaving the mansion with a red gift bag. One night, everyone dances and has fun until they hear a scream. It turns out that Jess has been bitten by a snake. Slater kills the snake with a bottle and assures her that the venom is not deadly. However, she begins to panic for some reason and leaves the party. When Frida approaches her, Jess says she wants her phone back and wants to leave. She claims that something unusual is happening here, and these people are strange, but Frida refuses to leave, claiming that she doesn't feel invisible for the first time in her life, and this is the vacation they have always desired. In the end, Jess also agrees and decides to stay on the island. Later on, while staying alone, Jess experiences a nosebleed. Frida begins her day the next morning by showering and applying the same perfume. She then goes for a walk and comes across a red bag lying on the floor in front of her room. Curious, Frida enters the room and discovers many red bags inside. The old maid arrives and starts calling her Red Rabbit again. She also gives Frida a strange green liquid, which the latter takes a sip of without hesitation. But the maid quickly points to some snake remains, revealing that the liquid is actually venom extracted from all the snakes they have caught. And Frida frantically leaves the room. In the next scene, she has a strange dream, in which she sees Jess holding a knife and asking her to hide it. When Frida wakes up, she isn't feeling well, and her appearance catches Sarah's attention. Lucas then shows up with a bruise on his eye, but no one pays much attention to it, just as no one notices Jess's absence. After breakfast, the men are excited to go fishing, while the girls decide to stay behind. One of the girls takes out Jess's lighter, prompting Frida to ask about her. But shockingly, none of them seem to recognize or remember someone named Jess. A worried Frida then rushes to the room where Jess is staying, only to find the furniture piled up, as if she had never been there. Frida then heads to her room, where she finds a knife behind a mirror. Just then, Sarah appears, holding the same lighter with Jess's name. Frida asserts that Jess was here, but Sarah says she would recall if another person was present. Frida then talks about the strange events that have been happening, like how she always wakes up with dirt under her nails. Sarah also shows a bruise on her arm and has no idea how she got it. Additionally, she confesses that she only knows Cody within their group. He had approached her in a coffee shop and invited her to the island. This realization makes them both aware that they are being manipulated by the men who are controlling their thoughts. Following this, Frida remembers Slater mentioning that forgetfulness is a gift. They then enter a room filled with several red bags, and speculate that the perfume they contain might be causing them to forget their memories. Frida also mentions that she started remembering things after drinking snake venom given to her by the maid. Later, Frida discovers more snake venom in the room, and gives it to Sarah to try. They mix it with tequila and give it to Heather and Camilla, hoping it will help them regain their memories. Stacy soon joins them, and also consumes some of the drinks. She then informs the girls that the men will be returning soon. Realizing time is running out, Frida searches for the phones inside and asks Sarah to yell if the men arrive. Not long after, Sarah starts to experience a nosebleed, just like Jess had before she vanished. When the men show up, Slater inquires about Frida's whereabouts, and Sarah responds that she's freshening up in her room. Meanwhile, Frida sneaks into Slater's private villa and unlocks a cupboard to search for the cell phones. She locates them, but hears Sarah shouting, and quickly conceals everything. Suddenly a box falls, and Frida is startled to find several Polaroid photos of people holding red bags. Shortly after, Slater enters the room and takes out some liquid to vape. Unaware that Frida is hiding under his desk, he is completely oblivious. Just then, the snake venom starts to affect her, causing her nose to bleed, and triggering memories where she sees herself and the other women bound and terrified, while the men torture them. It turns out the snake venom had caused Jess to remember everything, prompting Slater to order Stan to eliminate her. This shocks Frida, and she quickly flees, while the billionaire is distracted. She goes directly to Sarah and divulges everything that happened to Jess. Fearing the same fate, they usually act until Heather and Camilla regain their memories. Later that evening, during dinner, Frida's memories start flooding back. She realizes that the men have been assaulting them every night, and using the perfume to erase their memories. It turns out that Lucas was opposed to it, but the other men pressured him and urged him to mature. Frida also recalls Dr. Rich assaulting her recently, and how concerned he was that she would remember the incident. However, Slater reassured him that the worse it is, the more they forget. This explains why the lecherous doctor was alarmed and nervous when she recognized him a few days ago. In the present, the disturbing memory makes it challenging for Frida to pretend everything is okay, including Sarah. But she summons some courage and starts to dance. With Sarah joining her, the others soon join in, and the evening becomes another joyful gathering. But they are startled by a sudden scream, which turns out to be Camilla, who has remembered everything. In a fit of rage, she repeatedly stabs Tom and kills him until Slater arrives to restrain her. Heather's memories also return at this point, and she starts chasing Vic. Inside, Sarah stabs Cody's hand and attempts to attack him further, but he escapes. Meanwhile, Heather catches up to Vic and strikes him with a chessboard. She ends up smashing his face. But then the security Stan shoots her to death. Just then Stan notices Frida in the distance and begins to chase her. She runs into the woods, but he eventually catches up with her and prepares to shoot. Fortunately, Sarah strikes him with a massive rock from behind, killing him instantly after hitting him several times. Meanwhile, Slater drags a severely injured Vic and a tied-up Camilla into his private villa. Lucas, who has been using the perfume like the girls, doesn't understand what's happening and starts panicking. However, Slater disregards him and steps on Camilla's neck, causing her to suffocate and die. Elsewhere, Frida is searching for a knife in her room when Stacy arrives, clearly distressed. She realizes that Stacy's memories have returned. However, unlike the others, Stacy is influenced by the perfume by choice. She claims that forgetting is a gift and angrily accuses Frida of forcing her to remember such traumatic events. During the struggle, Frida fights back and ends up stabbing her in the chest to death. Back in the woods, Cody is searching for the remaining girls under Slater's orders when Sarah brutally shoots him to death. Meanwhile, Lucas is still perplexed and doesn't understand why the girls behave this way. On the other hand, Sarah reunites with Frida, who has found a Polaroid picture of herself in the mansion. The surprising thing is that this picture is from 1 year ago, which means Frida has also been here. Upon learning this, the girls arm themselves with a knife and a gun and head out to put an end to their tormentors. Shortly after, they reach Slater's mansion and demand that he open the door. He declines, but Lucas takes it upon himself to open it, and he is immediately shot and killed by Sarah. Meanwhile, Slater uses the situation to overpower Frida and lock the door. She tries to fight back with an object, but he quickly gains the upper hand. During this moment, Frida has a flashback to a year earlier when she attempted to escape. She fell on a rock, resulting in a wound on her face that later turned into a scar. On that day, Frida had painted her nails with a red rabbit design. She also recalls that she was the one who had bitten Vic's pinky finger at that time. In the present, Slater tells a restrained Frida that humanity would be liberated from suffering and pain if they could erase their traumas. He urges her to join him, put on perfume, and leave everything behind. Quietly, Frida starts to free herself with a shard of glass as he talks. Just then Sarah begins shooting at the locked door, but she soon runs out of bullets, causing Slater to go after her. He pulls her into the room where Frida, who has freed herself, is holding a knife. Slater takes the knife from her confidently, and Sarah is afraid he will kill her. However, the billionaire reassures her he won't, because she is his best friend. He then inhales from his vape and attempts to finish Sarah off, but suddenly becomes disoriented and confused. It turns out that while he was outside, Frida infused his vape liquid with the same perfume he had created. This causes Slater to collapse and accidentally knock over some candles, worsening the fire. The entire villa is soon engulfed in flames, and Frida leaves Vic to die in the room. Once outside, Sarah hopes that Frida knows what she's doing. As the camera pans out, it turns out that Frida has saved Slater from the burning villa. In the final scene, some time has passed, and we see Slater's company hosting another banquet. Dr. Rich approaches Slater, wanting to discuss something privately, but Slater appears disoriented and confused. Frida intervenes and informs the doctor that Slater won't be available, as she is now married to him. Dr. Rich becomes nervous when he sees her, especially when she claims she remembers him. The host then introduces Frida as the company's new CEO, all the while drugging Slater's vape to keep him disoriented and compliant.